I am a disruption and innovation theorist. I coach CEOs and I consult on personal disruption, specifically how to use a framework of personal disruption that's a proprietary framework in building great teams.
Super. So, at Strategizer, we work with very large organizations, and all along large organizations have been very aware that people are their assets. However, right now they're facing a lot of competition from startups, and even entrepreneurship has become a lot easier than it used to be. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to retain these people, or they're trying to attract them. And one of the things some of these companies are doing is creating these entrepreneurship programs within their organization. So I was wondering whether you could give us some tips for that person that's running such an entrepreneurship program. What could they do to select people into these programs? What kind of tips or guidelines do you have for them?
Well, I think first of all, bravo for doing it, because every single person's on a learning curve, including you, and we all we're actually learning machines, I would say. We want the opportunity to not know how to do something, to figure out how to do it, master it, and then start all over again. And so by having an entrepreneurship program, it's really harnessing that biology of wanting to learn that people have. In terms of selecting people into the program, I think what you're looking for is you can pretty well know what the domain expertise is because you work together in the same company, and that's pretty easily credentialed and figured out. I think from there, what you want to look for is who are people that are able to learn? Who are people who are able to figure stuff out? Who are people who are DIYers? And so one of the questions that you want to ask people is, for example, when was the last time you got feedback on a project that you're working on, and what did you do? That's going to give you a lot of information on, is this person able to learn quickly? Is this person able, when they get feedback, to not take it personally and just say, great, good feedback, next, let's move on, because this is a person who's capable of iterating really quickly. I think another criteria that you want to use is this person someone who likes to learn? We oftentimes, because entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship generally is very exciting right now and very sexy, we have people like, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be an entrepreneur. And so part of what you want to do, again, is say, okay, if we were working on this project for 3 months and we decide to scuttle it, we need to go in a different direction, what would you do? If the person was like, that's not fair, we shouldn't change it, then probably not someone who's comfortable pivoting. But if they're like, that's what the project requires, point me in the right direction, or even better, I figured out that we need to scuttle this project, let's move on, then that's a person who, again, you can qualify in the domain expertise, but you want a person who's able to learn, who's comfortable learning, who's able to take feedback, but also a person who's willing to pivot as necessary, because that's what entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship requires.
Cool. Earlier today in your presentation, you mentioned this S-curve, and I have a question around that. So maybe you want to just quickly help us understand again what the S-curve is, and then I'd like to link to that.
Yeah, so one of the big ahas that I had when I was investing at the Disruptive Innovation Fund with Clayton Christensen is that this theory of disruption at a very basic level helps us understand and really is a framework for change. And then the second aha that came along was that this S-curve that was popularized by E.M. Rogers in 1962 is not something that you just use to figure out how quickly an innovation will be adopted, but it also helps you understand how people learn. It helps you understand how people change. And so what I've done with this S-curve is said, okay, we've got this S-curve of learning. Every single person is on a learning curve, including you, and your organization is a collection of those learning curves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so in this S-curve, like at the beginning they are at the beginning of that learning curve, so they're inexperienced. Then there's kind of the sweet spot where you're really, kind of challenged a bit, but you also know how to go about things. And then there's the mastery level, right?
Yeah.
And I think that these entrepreneurship programs offer those masters the opportunity to make this leap that you speak of, to go back into that inexperienced phase. And I'm wondering, how could these entrepreneurship programs be marketed to the general public of the employees? What could they be saying to tap into this need to disrupt themselves?
Yeah, okay. All right, so the S-curve, let me give you a little bit more detail, and then I'll talk through what you can do and how you can leverage this framework as you try to recruit people for entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And so when you're at the bottom of an S, you're brand new, you don't know how to do stuff, it's like a jumble of puzzle pieces and you don't know how they all go together. And so that allows you to be in a position where you ask questions like, why do we do it like that? And you typically on any given team, you want 15% of your people there. Then you want 70% of your people in the sweet spot where they're starting to put those puzzle pieces together. They've kind of got a sense, but they haven't figured it all out. So it's still hard, but it's not too hard, and it's easy, but not too easy. And this is the sweet spot where all your neurons are firing. And on any given team, you want about 70% of your people here. And then you want 15% of your people at the high end of a learning curve where they really are masters and they know a lot. They have this perspective. They're on the top of the mountain. But if you leave them there too long, the plateau can become a precipice. So one of the things or opportunities I think you have when you're thinking about entrepreneurship is that when you've got people at the top of a learning curve who are very capable, they've got tremendous domain expertise, and you're thinking, all right, well, I know they're kind of bored, the dopamine hits aren't there, and I don't want them to leave, but I also don't want them to get complacent, but they've got this tremendous latent capacity. Why don't I suggest to them that they go do entrepreneurship, this sort of side hustle within the larger, broader organization that will allow them to continue to do what they're doing and have the security of doing that, but at the same time, go spend couple of hours a week not knowing what they're doing and seeing what happens in their brain because they're in this position of being a novice again. And I think that's a really, obviously the organization benefits, but I think it also really allows a person who feels like at the top of their curve to both have the security of being in the company, but also have the excitement and the thrill of jumping and trying something new.
Yeah, and this is something that we've seen a lot with the teams that we work with, that they come on board. And when they start learning about, lean startup and business model innovation, prototyping, experimentation, they get really, really excited and they're super eager to jump into it and do everything. But one of the challenges they face is that all of this is on top of their normal jobs, what they're supposed to do. And over time in this program, some of them start losing steam and feeling a bit overwhelmed. So I'm wondering whether you have any advice for us as coaches, but also for these organizations where they've got their entrepreneurship managers or maybe even senior managers. What could we be doing to keep the spirit high, to help these people continue in this program?
Well, okay, so when you've got a person who's at the top of a learning curve and now they've jumped to the bottom of a new learning curve in this entrepreneurship program, there's a couple of things. If, initially they're super enthused, but then that enthusiasm starts to wane. There can be a couple of things happening, and there are a couple of things you can do. The first is that according to the theory of disruption, whenever you jump to a new curve, when you do something new, your odds of success are 6 times higher if you're willing to try something new. But that's 6% to 36%. So there's still this 64% chance that you're on the wrong curve. So sometimes what's happening is that they're saying, I want to try this thing, and they do it, and they're realizing it's not the right curve for me. It might not even be the right curve for me to do something new right now. So that's one of the things that they may be discovering, which is okay, because there might be something else for them to do. But the other piece is assuming that it is the right curve. And one of the ways I think through that is you ask questions like, are you taking on market risk, meaning on the team? Are you the only person doing that job? Are you playing to your strengths? Is it hard for you but not debilitating? And are you gaining momentum? If those things are in place, then persistence may be required. And what I would say to them is, remember the math of the S curve. At the bottom of the S, what's going to happen is you're going to do a lot. A lot of time's going to pass, but you're not moving up the y-axis. It's going to be that you're working hard and it's going to look like nothing is happening. That's just the bottom of the curve. So what I want to say to you is, if you're actually enjoying this inherently, but you're feeling like nothing is happening, just stay with it a little bit longer, because that's what the bottom of the S curve looks like. Don't get discouraged. Typically it takes about 6 months if you're working at it 4 hours a week, but you might not be at it 40 hours a week. So I would say might be the wrong curve, but typically low to the curve, that's just the nature of the beast. And so persist, stay with it, understand that you're discouraged. It can feel like a slog, but if you'll stay, then you're going to get to that sweet spot where it starts to be really fun.
All right. The other thing is also, many large organizations aren't yet there with either entrepreneurship programs or anything like that. And you end up having small pockets within these organizations where they're working on innovation or they are looking to come up with some new products or something like that. So what we've just discussed right now, is it any different for your advice for these other teams? Would that be any different?
I would say, the only thing I would say is that you can take, when you think about this S-curve of learning framework, this is really a framework for you as an organization, whether it's entrepreneurship or just innovation generally as an organization. If you want an organization that's going to be innovative, that can manage through change, you want to at any given time have 15% of your people at the low end. Why? Yes, they're inexperienced, but they also ask those questions. Why do we do it like that? And that helps you be more innovative because you have to answer that. Why do we do it like that? At any given time, you want the 15% of your people at the high end who can say, well, we do it like that for X, Y, and Z reasons. They've got this perspective. They can really be an anchor and they can be a master to your apprentices. And then you want 70% of your people in the sweet spot. And those are the people who know enough, they've got enough competency to really be productive, but not so much that they're bored, and they're really the people who are capable of innovating. And what I would say is, if as an organization at any point in time you think, I wonder if we're at risk, like we've been doing really well, but are we at risk of being disrupted? Just take the pulse of your workforce. Because if you have too many people at the high end of that curve, what does that tell you? They're bored. And people who are bored do not innovate. They leave or they get complacent. And so that's how you get disrupted. And so what you want to do is you want to have some of them do something new. It might be that they leave the organization. It might be that they go do entrepreneurship, try something new. It might be that you give them this really big stretch assignment so that they move back down the curve. But that's really what I would say, whether it's an entrepreneurship program or your organization writ large, if you want innovation, you do it by optimizing those learning curves.
Whitney, it's been great talking to you. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. So is there any other way that people can get some more information on this topic? You've got a website, Twitter,
yes.
anything that you would like to share with us?
What I would say, two suggestions. Number one is that if you go to my website, whitneyjohnson.com/diagnostic, you can actually take the S-curve of learning. And so you can see where you are, but then you can also have your team take it and you can suss out and say, okay, well, we've got too many people in the sweet spot or too many people at the low end, et cetera, and just start to figure out how do you load balance those curves. And then the other thing I would say is that I've got a podcast called the Disrupt Yourself Podcast. You can go to my website and where I do interviews of people who are disrupting, sometimes inside of organizations, sometimes not, but it really gives you an idea of what that can look like. And it's a lot of fun to be able to hear people kind of living out loud and thinking through disruption out loud. And so I find it inspirational, and my listeners tell me they do too. So those are two suggestions.
Thank you very much, Whitney.
Thank you.